Okay, this is a game in the WZ-111 1-4, the Tier 9 Chinese heavy. It's a pretty good tank. It's pretty mobile, has decent armor for the tier, it's got a pretty good gun, pretty good turret. It doesn't really have like super great gun handling like, you know, most of the Chinese heavies, but otherwise it's quite a solid tank, and one of my more favorite Tier 9s to play in terms of the heavies. And so this is on Erlenberg in standard mode. So we're going to talk about a number of things as we go through here, but primarily what I want to talk about in this video is this concept of push to contact, and how to push to contact, and when to push to contact, and why. And sort of the decisions that you make as you deploy. You know, I'm always a big fan, if you watch the stream, I'm always a big fan of getting early intel. I'm always a fan of trying to get an idea of what the enemy team is doing, because I think that having that sort of intel really helps inform you in terms of what positions are good for you to take and what positions are good for your team to take, who's going to be in an advantageous position and who's not. And so I'm going to go east here. I like to push up the 9 line, especially in relatively armored tanks. They have 4 tier 10s on their team, not including the Arty. So we have our Type 62 that's moved up on this west side. Not like a super awesome place for a light tank to go, but not horrible. He'll at least spot these guys if they come down through the middle here. And a couple of things to note is that, you know, their T-57s are in a platoon with the E4. Doesn't necessarily mean that they'll stick together, but sometimes, particularly if they're in very similar type tanks, like if you see one T-57, yeah, the T-57 is probably in that same general area. Not always, but something that we will keep in mind. You look at what we deployed to this side, right? So we have an Object 263, we have 4 Tier 9 tanks and 1 Indian Panzer. Right, so we got the 5120, Lorraine, E50, M103 here. So we've got a lot of weight on this side. So we've spotted their T57, M103 on the other side. So the other T57 may or may not be there. So the tier 10s that can potentially be in front of us are the Object 268 and the E4. So that's something that we'll keep in mind. So at this point, we've gotten to this area here. Most of our faster tanks are still a little bit too far back. The 263 is up here with me, which is actually really nice, right? Because if there's, you know, they don't really have a whole lot of speed on their team, but if they're T-54, for example, let's say they, instead of having one T-54, they had a bunch of T-54s, you know, I don't want to be in a position where they can just jump me without having very much backup. We've got most of our tanks, but they're still a little bit far behind. Not that these are very slow tanks, right? The E-50 is not that slow, 5120 is not that slow, 40T is not that slow. The M103 is probably about that slow, but he could have gotten there faster. And so what I want to do is I want to see what is around this corner, what's coming up here, and if there's like, if one of the T-57s is pushing up here, to take them out, right? And so about when I get to this point, right, we've cleared this lane right here, so we know that they're not through here, right? Because I can detect all the way in there. It's not a very long distance. Our team is still pretty far behind us, but we're gonna push to contact because we know that we've cleared this area. There's one artillery that we have to be concerned about. We don't know what's over on this line, right? So if you ever watch me play mediums on this map, typically what I'll do is I'll push up this 8-9 line to get spots on this back ditch right here so that I can spot slow tanks, tank destroyers, and other things that are pushing back here. But we don't have that sort of intel in this particular game. We know that they've got a few tanks on the west, but we don't really know how many and where. So it's not going to cost me anything, or it's not going to be much of a risk for me to pop up to the top of this and to see if there's anything back here. And then I can do that one of two ways, right? Either I spot something or my sixth sense gets set off, and when I don't, right? And so I get to about right here. Sixth sense still hasn't gone off. We haven't spotted anything. The 263 has already started going down this way, which is somewhat of an aggressive move. The 263 is a fast tank. It's got reasonable armor, but it still has a pretty weak side armor. And the rest of our guys are still pretty far back, so we need to take that into account. But our 263 is pushing up, so we're going to continue pushing to contact here. And then so now at this point, right, if there's nobody back here, you're pretty much clear all the way to these buildings at the very least. You have a lot of cover on that sort of approach. But we still want to see how little they've come on this side, right? And so this is important because, like, when you look at the map control now, they might have some map control in this middle here. They have map control in this northwest, but we control now essentially 3/4 of the map, and that's a huge amount of map control to work with. And so we're going to continue pushing to contact. We know that they have a couple of slow tanks like the T-95, T-28 that have not been spotted yet. The majority of their tanks haven't been spotted. And so at this point, right, 14 of their tanks must be within these squares right here, right? They probably haven't scored it out anywhere else. So we know that they're in front of us, and so we're going to hit a density of tanks at some point. Crossing this low ground is fine because there's, even if I was spotted going down there, I got cover from direct fire, so don't have to worry about artillery. Most of the times artillery will be back here, and so I'm pushing forward because I want to get to that artillery before we get lit, right? And so it's less than, you know, I mean, it's just a little bit over 2 minutes into the game. We've shrunk their map control down to a quarter of the map basically, and we're basically in an area where we can potentially spot artillery. So I want to be able to get through here as fast as I can. I'm not too worried about the T-95. T-95 is not worried about me. Their team hasn't been reactive enough here. They haven't had enough time to turn around and come back the other way. So both myself and the E-50 are able to get over here. I don't know why the T-92 is not even facing the right direction, but whatevs. And then so now we're up underneath them, right? So we can essentially proxy spot this T-95. We can get shots on this M103. The artillery is out, so the only thing in play is direct fire now. I'm kind of hoping that our E-50 doesn't get himself killed here. And so we know, again, so their T-28 is here, but we know that the majority of their tanks have to be on this 1-2 line, right? So somewhere between this C1 and this F2 area is the rest of the 13 of their tanks. Well, okay, sorry, minus these two. So the rest of their 11 of their tanks. And so you want to be careful here because we don't have a whole lot of backup yet. See how most of our guys that were on this side are still on this side. The M103 is still coming around this way. We have the 268 in this area. He's sort of dealing with the T-95. He's at least occupying his attention. They've got an M103 that's reactive, that's back here now, but that's not that much of a problem because we can hold down here. I'm having some trouble actually shooting him. But the T-95 is still occupied with the 263, and so the way that they're configured allows us to actually move forward here. There's no, again, we're only concerned about direct fire. So if I can either get this T-95 to turn towards me, right, which will give our 263 great shots, or he can continue aimed at our 263, and then it's just a matter of, are these guys going to try to come over on us over here? We see that both of their tier 10 T-57 heavies are over here. We know that their 268 is over on that side. We don't know where the... Oh, I'm sorry. We do know that the E4 already died. And so this T-95 is just, you know, going to allow me to shoot him. And his friends aren't stopping me, right? This M103 is here, and he's not really challenging me, preventing me from taking my attention away from this guy. He's a little bit fixated on the E-50. So their 268 is coming across now. He's headed north through this C2. So I see that, and I want to try to save him because it looks like he's beelining for our E50. I want to try to save him by hitting him in the track, and unfortunately I'm not able to. And so he's able to take out our E50. And that puts me in somewhat of a dangerous position. I need to try to track this tank destroyer and get to his side before he reloads. So there's an M103 coming in right now. So I have the side of the 268 more or less. So right now our artillery just hit the M103. So I actually, as long as you have this guy locked, I can shoot at the M103 rather than the 268. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that I stay on the side of this guy, but get a shot on the M103. And the way that the 268 has turned, he's allowed me to do that. But it's because it's a Batchat arty. Our Batchat arty is actually able to take him out, so I don't even have to worry about that, which is nice. But as long as you have a non-turreted tank destroyer side saddled, you can focus on other things. Just make sure that you pay attention to keep the side saddle on. And you can basically, like, I could have just auto-aimed that M103 and made sure that I kept on the 268. Alright, and then it's just a matter of cleaning up. They finally pushed through this southwest side. But I've still got my 263 here with me, which is fantastic. They tried to put their 1375 on cap, but we had, you know, we still had a bunch of those guys back here, a bunch of our tier 9s. And then really it's just a matter of mopping up. It costs them a lot of health in order to push through that. Right. They lost both of their... They lost the other 2 10s that they had there already.
It's a trap!
And this 263 did a pretty good job of pushing up. He's getting himself shot in the side right now.
It's a trap!
But pumps the brakes. And the T-54 is running away from the 263. And then it's just pretty much just mop up at this point.
It's a trap!
Well, I think part of the 268 problem was the same issue with the T95, is that they weren't really set up to stop us on that west side. I'm sorry, on that north side, because the way that their dispersion was, right? They went strong west. They sent literally 0 tanks to the east. You know, they had 2 tanks in the center. When you have that lopsided of a dispersion, you need to make sure that you have some eyes back this way and some guns back this way as well. So it's a question of how many good shots does the T-68 actually get down in this direction, and that's questionable as to you know, what success they've had. But this was a situation where their dispersion was very poor, right? They didn't send even eyes at all to the east. There's nothing to slow us down over here. And so the important part that we're trying to highlight is that in a tank like the WZ-111, in this situation, right, where we spotted at least one of their tier 10s on the other side, it behooves me to at least check through this lane, right, to push to contact. And if there's nothing here, if there's nothing in this, you know, C8, C9 area, if there's nothing here, there's nothing stopping me from pushing up here to the next one and seeing if there's anybody back here. If there's nobody back here, there's nothing stopping me from pushing up to the next one and seeing if there's anybody here, right? And so you take these sort of stepwise movements in order to clear areas, right? And so the problem that I have with a lot of players is that they won't do that. Like, they'll come up to this corner where they're used to seeing somebody, and then they'll stop before they look around it, despite the fact that they don't know that there's anything there. So they'll let nothing stop them. And so in games like this, where their team all goes to one side, you'll end up with a bunch of tanks, right? We had 2 tier 10s, 4 tier 9s, and 1 tier 8 on this east side. You'll have that much weight just sitting here waiting for guys that are just not there. Whereas if you just make this, if you just serially check these areas, right? So if I saw a bunch of guys in this C9 when I peeked around that corner, all I had to do was back up, right? If I saw a bunch of guys camped in this A8, A9 area when I popped over this hill, all I'd have to do is come back down, right? So you want to just make sure that you go that extra 5 meters to check around the corner to see if anybody's there. Because if there's not anybody there, or if there's just one guy there, like if I looked around the corner and they had their Object 416 here and there was literally no other tanks, bully, right? So, you know, you want to be able to at least check that in situations where you can do it safely. Like, for example, if I was in a tier 10 game, like if this was the same game that it is now, but I was in a AMX 5100, I wouldn't necessarily want to be as aggressive going around there, because like if there was a T57 there, he could clip me before I died, before I could get back. So in that case, you would want to be a little bit more careful. But in a situation like this, in a tank like this, you know, it's very easy for me to check around the corner. If he gets a couple of shots at my turret, it's most likely going to bounce anyways. So I can check, and so it's important to be able to do that. And what's important about that is that because of the fact that they had 15 tanks on the west half of this map and 0 tanks on the east half of this map, we were able to clear this east side so quickly that they were not able to win this south side. right? They were not able to win this south side fast enough. We had a group of our tanks here. It's maybe like 6 tanks or so at the back of the castle, but those guys weren't going to last against 13 tanks on this side and 2 tanks in the middle, right? It's just you're asking too much for somebody to win a 6v13. It's just not going to happen. And because we cleared out this other side fast enough, right, we're able to take out the Arty, we're able to occupy the T-95, the M103, the 268, all these other tanks that aren't dealing with this. And so because we pushed to contact, we were able to get to their backside before they were able to eliminate our castle group. And they still didn't push very efficiently through our castle group. Maybe they felt hurried, maybe they didn't, maybe they just traded poorly. But if we didn't push through here, if we allowed them to clear out our castle group before we even engage them at all, then that's a huge advantage to their team. All right, so if we look at the stats, it worked out pretty much as expected. We didn't spot very many vehicles, but I mean, that's fine. It happens. They didn't have that many vehicles on that side. I think we spotted like the T-95 and the M103 or something. Oh, the T-92, right? Ooh, and the 268. Did not know that. But anyways, so we still were able to get a lot of damage because we were sort of on an edge where we can push the backside. The T-92 was gravy just because we knew that he didn't really have anywhere to run. It was one of the few places that he could be on the map. And so it was pretty easy to get through that flank. And the T-95 is just not fast enough to reposition to stop us from the area that he was on. And the rest of their guys, because they had no eyes, they had no idea who was coming from that east side until the T-95 spotted us crossing over by the cap. He probably spotted the 263. They didn't have enough time to react to bring the 268 back or the M103 back or anybody else back to actually cover through that side, which was the sort of major flaw there. But anyways, so I hope that explains, at least in part, when I talk about push to contact in the stream and when it's important, why it's important, and why intel and map control and speed in terms of how quickly you win or dominate a map, sections of the map that you should dominate. And if there's 0 tanks, if there's 0 enemy tanks in a specific section of the map, you should dominate against 0 tanks, or at least hopefully anyways. Anyways, so I hope that was helpful, and thanks for watching.